Dear Diary, today I'm going to give you a sad story. It's just one of maybe about 400, 500 stories I could tell you about prosecutors who are super criminals. As a victim of crime, I've met not one honest prosecutor. We're talking super criminal scumbags. When you shit upon victims of crime, you should be tortured. And when I was allegedly a victim of crime, they cheated and lied every single time. For 20 years, they've been doing this shit to me. And I'm going to try and log a lot of these stories because you would never believe the shit. And the newspapers don't want to talk about it because prosecutors work for the same team as the rich who own all the newspapers, TV stations, radio stations, etc. It's one giant happy Nazi family. Let's take the time I was repeatedly stabbed. Let's see, how succinct can I be? I used to, when I first came to New York City from Boston, I used to work at the knitting factory, the original knitting factory, and I loved that place. And the owner, Michael Dorff, was a fucking jerk-off scumbag who ripped me off and many other artists. And I was interning there first with this guy named John. And he was a little eccentric, but an interesting fellow. And we were sort of friends. And many, many, many months later, after he and I both no longer worked there, I went in to say hi to some of the staff and stuff because it was a bar on the first floor and the performance space on the second floor. And I went in there one day at 5 p.m. There was only a few people in the bar, and he was sitting in the back. And I was like, "Hey, John, what's up?" And he just gave me this weird look, this creepy, weird look. And I made a joke. I said, "Why is it that every time I see you, you get weirder and weirder?" And I made some joke like, "Are you on heroin?" And he stood up, and people poured their drinks on me more often than you'd expect. I have a tendency to say what I think, and that's a big no-no in human society. In human society, you're supposed to say what everybody else expects you to say. You're supposed to tell people what they want to hear. I like to joke around. I think our world is too uptight. I think our world is too fucking conservative. I think our world is too fucking horrible and robotic. I goof off all the time. I joke around all the time. Most famous comics will tell you they developed their sense of humor to get themselves out of trouble. I'm the exact opposite. My whole life, my sense of humor has gotten me into trouble. But that's a story for another day. I don't believe that anything's taboo. So he gets up. He's drinking a mug of beer or whatever, and I'm afraid he's going to actually pour it on me because he's got this psychotic look in his eyes. Instead, he finishes. He gulps the last sip. And then, "Yes, sir, dear diary, you get what you pay for. I bought a top-of-the-line MacBook Pro, and it is a piece of shit. Every single program created by Mac is a piece of shit. Even people who say Mac is awesome say, well, yeah, iMovie shit and Safari shit." It's like, okay, then you're saying Apple is shit. Fucking assholes. Computer just glitched on me again. So, yeah, you humans got to loosen up a little bit. So, John takes the last sip of his beer and then quickly smashes me upside the head with the beer mug. And he pummels me a bunch of times, maybe like 10 to 20 blows. And I just kind of put my hand up to kind of defend myself a little bit. What I didn't realize as I was getting the beating, because, I've been beaten up my whole life. I'm the most beaten up human in history. People think I'm not that special as I claim to be. Okay, well, I've been beaten up over 5,000 times by over 3,000 people. I dare you to find any human in recorded history with a life half that bad. I dare you to find one person beaten up by 1,500 people. Bet you can't do it. I might even dare say you can't find a human in history 25% as victimized as I am. Because I'm a pacifist. I've been a pacifist since I was 9. Don't ever be a pacifist. It is foolish. It actually creates violence. If somebody fucks at you and you break their fucking face, most of the time they're not going to fuck with you again. You have to fucking pummel the shit out of bullies so people leave you alone. Humans are disgusting creatures. Now, you know, if you get beaten or anything like that, your endorphins kick in immediately and you kind of don't even feel the pain anymore. And so he's pummeling me with this beer mug. And I'm still, you know, we're talking about 5 seconds or whatever. And I'm trying to figure out, what the fuck? What did I do? I made a little joke. And then he walked away. I then look down and see blood is gushing out of the palm of my right hand. To this day, you can still see the scar in the palm of my right hand. I have 50% nerve damage in my index finger and my right hand thumb, which is important when you're a righty and you're a brilliant musician and a brilliant visual artist. And then my face was a mask of blood. What happened was, after the first time the beer mug smashed into my skull, the beer handle separated from the glass mug, and he continued to punch me and punch me and punch me with 2 glass spikes. Now, you might say, that's some pretty serious shit. You're right. That's why you're going to hear how we need to murder all prosecutors. You can't reason with a Nazi. No matter what you think, you cannot reason with a Nazi. You can't take Nazis to court. You have to murder Nazis. There's nothing else you can do. And all prosecutors I've ever met were super Nazis. Because remember, the Nazis actually respected the rule of law. Prosecutors don't. You can't compare an American prosecutor to a Nazi. It's not fair. They're 1,000 times worse than a Nazi. I can't tell you enough bad things about prosecutors. So I'm bleeding. My whole face is a mask of blood. I've got blood all over me. I'm stabbed in the shoulder, the back, everywhere. Customers. Now, I'm a goofball. I'm still, even as he was hitting me, I was cracking jokes. And then after he leaves, I'm cracking jokes about my blood gushing all over the floor. And if you've ever been stabbed in the palm of the hand, it's kind of funny because it doesn't just come out in a stream of blood, because your heart pumps. So it's like, vlap, vlap, vlap. It's like turning the faucet on, off, on, off, on, off. I'm watching the blood just pouring out like I'm Spider-Man shooting blood instead of webs. And I wanted to die since I was 5. So, you know, me bleeding is not scary. It's celebration. I only wish somebody would finish me off and fucking put me out of my misery. So customers, the 5 or so customers in there and the bartender who knows me are all kind of like, what the fuck just happened? And at first I'm cracking so many jokes. I wish I could remember them. Because this was a long time ago. I was like 22 years old and covered in blood. My face is a complete mask of blood. But I'm cracking so many jokes, people thought it was a performance. They thought I was like doing some kind of performance art bit or something like that. And then the bartender, Julie, was like, oh my God. I'm like, no, he just attacked me. And she's like, oh my God, you're covered. Remember, I couldn't see. She's like, you're covered in blood. And then she's like, we should call an ambulance. I'm like, no, don't call an ambulance. I don't have health insurance. I can't pay for that shit. Okay? You know the way the for-profit business robs you blind. Our medical care in America robs you blind. You know, they'll charge me $1,000 just for the ambulance ride. And I was young and didn't know, you know, are they going to fucking ruin my credit? What are they going to do with that? So I was like, no, don't get me an ambulance. No. And I was like, you know, I'll either die or I'll get this shit stitched up. And I was like, is there any place in the neighborhood that can stitch people up, like a little community healthcare center or something? And so me and another person there, I think it was a regular customer who knew me a little bit, we walked around the neighborhood because there was supposed to be a place nearby, but it had closed. Finally got into a cab and went up to the hospital. I took amazing photographs in the hospital of my mask of blood. And they fucking never came out because it's called capitalism. Cameras are pieces of shit because everything mankind makes is a piece of shit because greed has ruined everything. Real sad that those photos never made it. And then my face dried too. It was cool too. I don't know if you know this, but like they stapled my head and all that shit. But then you're not, or when they stapled, or they stitched me all up and things like that. And then I don't think they stapled me that time. And then they said you can't shower for like a day. I'm like, what? So for a day or two, it might have been 3 days, I had to keep all my hair matted blood and things like that. And then when I took a shower 3 days later, it was incredible because I'm in the shower and it smells just like meat. You know, like I've been a vegetarian since I'm 21, but if you remember when you get like meat in the freezer in the store and you take it out and you thaw it out before you cook it, it's in all that meat juice, that aspic or whatever. That meat juice has a specific smell. And that was the smell in the shower. And I was like, oh my God, I'm red meat. And now we knew where he worked. John worked at Wetlands down in Tribeca, a little hippie club. And I went to the police and they went and arrested him. And then the DA's office, the DA's office didn't do shit because their job is to protect crime. Because imagine if they solved crime. Well, they'd all be out of a job. So prosecutors have an incentive to be corrupt. That's why every prosecutor in America is corrupt. I mean, it's only one reason they're corrupt, but it's a pretty big one. If they solve crime, they lose their jobs. And most of our law enforcement is a job protection racket. Most of the world doesn't have anywhere near any of the crime that America does. But the states get billions of dollars. New York City, we get billions of dollars from the feds in crime money, right? War on drugs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. Lawyers, judges, and cops, if we legalize drugs. If somebody was in charge, they could say, well, you guys are all going to lose your job. We're going to make sure you guys can open liquor stores that sell pot. You see? But nobody's in charge. There's no coordination. Society is run by a bunch of fucking morons. And so prosecutors lie all the time and they commit crime all the time. And they have absolute immunity. When you try to sue a prosecutor, the judges say you can't because they have absolute immunity. Now, that clearly violates the 14th Amendment's protection clause, but don't get me started. Equal protection. No one is above the law. Oh, unless you work for the government. Nice dry assholes. And so the DA finally contacted me and said, or I can't remember, but I think he invited me into the office. Or he's like, Christopher, I'd like to meet with you to talk about the case. I go in and he's like, John pled guilty. Oh, I said, why the fuck did he even hit me? I wasn't really mad at him. I just thought the guy's fucking insane. Because I'm too nice a guy. But the first thing was I said, why did he do it? Did he tell you? And he said, yeah. He said he hit you because he was afraid you were going to annoy him. Wow. But then the DA told me he did a plea deal. So John pled guilty and the case is resolved. And I said, well, what's going to happen to him? He's going to go to jail? Is he going to pay my $4,000 in hospital bills? What's he going to do? And the DA said, well, nothing. And I said, wait a minute. You mean he pled guilty in exchange for no punishment of any kind? No community service? No cleaning up the parks? No paying my hospital bills? And the DA says, oh, yeah. I hope someday history can look up that fucking piece of shit ADA. I don't remember who he was. I've dealt with dozens and dozens of district attorneys, assistant district attorneys, and prosecutors. They're all fucking scumbags. And this piece of shit. Now you have to remember, I got the scars all over my body. This is almost like attempted murder. But I said to him, is it against the law to stab somebody repeatedly? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what's the punishment? If it's against the law, what's the punishment? And the DA said, he's like, well, he did that initial time in jail. Yeah. He did like 5 hours in jail. Now, I got 12 months in jail for misdemeanor speech. So let's put this in perspective. This guy not only stabbed me repeatedly and could have murdered me. Not that I care, but that's not how the law works. You know? We're talking really serious crime here. And $4,000 in hospital bills. That could ruin my credit. That could do a lot of fucking, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, and most people would say, that's fucking outrageous. That DA should be put in prison. And you're right, he should be put in prison. But now you got to put it in perspective. I don't think I've ever done less than 5 hours in jail for misdemeanor speech. You got that? This guy stabs me repeatedly and does 5 hours in jail total at the precinct when he was initially fingerprinted and processed. He didn't spend the night in jail. I've been thrown in jail over 35 times. They've tortured me. They've starved me. They've put me in cells, freeze the fuck out of me, take my jacket, et cetera, open up the windows and freeze me for 15 hours because there's nothing you can do and it doesn't leave a mark. DAs have committed all kinds of crimes and lied in all of my cases to put me in jail over and over again. They've cheated over and over again, over and over and over again. They've set bail when they legally couldn't. They've done all kinds of crimes. Every single ADA and district attorney I've ever met. Corrupt, corrupt, corrupt. And so think about that. This guy almost kills me. He gets 5 hours in jail total. I criticize the government in a way that is completely protected, and I get 12 months in jail. I only served 7, and it was 2 sentences, six months for this and 6 months for that. One set of the 6 months was for attempted harassment. I wasn't even convicted of harassing City Hall. I was convicted by a judge appointed by City Hall of attempted harassment, which no one has ever seen before. It's not even actually in the books. And when I asked the judge in the trial to explain it, she couldn't. She refused to. Imagine that. You're allowed to fight charge against you, but you have no way of knowing what the charge is or how it's defined so you can prove yourself innocent. Sorry, much worse than the Nazis. Look it up. White Rose Group and other factors. Nazi Germany was 1,000 times more lawful and honorable and decent than the American government is. But you still believe the shit you're brainwashed from birth. It's all fucking lies. And nothing ever came of it. I didn't know my rights at the time. If I did, I would have fucking sued the fuck out of the city. Because the DAs, you can't sue the DAs, but you can sue the city, in effect, who the DAs kind of work for, or the state. And I could have sued under RICO, which I didn't know, which I'm suing them now for thousands of other crimes. I think it'd be a stretch to go that far back, but we'll see. I mean, it's all cumulative. It just proves that these guys are an organized crime syndicate. And we can prove it with hundreds of millions of facts. I mean, in my case alone, I can show you, no joke, over 100,000 separate illegal acts by the DAs against me over 20 years. Aish. And then the only addendum here. Oh, so again, you can't believe how corrupt prosecutors are. No one can. And the media covers it up because they work for the same team. Just like the idea that I could be in front of a judge who decides whether I'm guilty or not, and that judge is appointed by the alleged victim. That's unbelievably illegal. I mean, that's a federal fucking crime. But even if I could win all my RICO suits, I can't go after judges. That's what's the scariest thing. Nobody can touch judges. Only the legislature can change it. Because these crooks gave themselves illegal protections, but there's no way to sue them because you can't do a suit without going to a judge. If I can get in front of a jury, I win. But I can't get to a jury because the judges won't allow it. See, it's all a giant racket. So the addendum here is many years later. I mean, I never saw that guy again, John. And then, which was good. Even though, again, I wasn't mad at him. I just thought, what a crazy psycho. Many, over a decade later, I was seeing a show. I kind of don't want to name the kook. Even though everyone else, when I've talked about him, they go, oh, yeah, he's crazy. And the DA told him, listen, if you want to stab people, you can. You may have to spend a couple hours in jail. But if you want to just stab people, go for it. That's what the DA said. And I went to see a band with my ex, Delfino, and the normal bassist wasn't in the band. So I said, hey, can you go over there and ask that bassist, the new bassist, what happened to the old bassist? She went over, and then she came back, and I looked at the guy and said, he looks a little familiar. And then she came back and said, that guy just asked me, are you Christopher Brodeur? I was like, oh. And then he said something like he used to know me. And then as the show was going on, I was like, oh no, I just realized that's the guy who stabbed me and almost murdered me when I was 22. And I said, don't be surprised if he leaps off the stage mid-song because he's a fucking nut job. And then a couple years later, I was at a Halloween party in Brooklyn. A Haunted Pussy was playing a weird bill with the New York Howl and, was it Diva? And the three bands all played together as one and did excerpts. It wasn't Diva. It was, who was the third band? And it was pretty interesting because we were doing, three bands had mutated into one giant band, and we did songs of each act and as like an orchestra. It was pretty cool. Oh, it was the Pizzas. And before the show, it was Halloween, before the party started, there was a bunch of us musicians and stuff hanging out. The place was mostly empty, loft party. And a bunch of us were sitting on the couch, Stefan and Brer of the New York Howl and a girl or two. And we were sitting down, and this guy walks in all by himself, and he looks like he's got a top hat on and a skeletal face painted on him, wearing like a black tux maybe or something. And he came up by us, and I just said, like, nice costume, because it was a pretty dramatic costume. He put a lot of effort into it. And all of a sudden, we were all sitting down on this couch. All of a sudden, the guy, like, pretty much jumps me and starts pounding me in the head over and over and over and over and over again. But it was, and this is funny because I've been assaulted by so many people in my life. But as soon as he jumped me, my first thought was, is this that guy John? Who I haven't seen in 15 years or whatever? Is this that guy John? And it turned out it was. And those guys, then he disappeared. He just pummeled me and then split. And then the other guys were like, what the fuck was that all about? What happened? I'm like, you guys saw it. He fucking jumped me out of the blue. He's a psycho. And that was the end of that. Remember, the moral of this story, all DAs should be murdered. I'm not joking. They are mass murdering criminals. I can prove in a court of law millions of murders that happened only because of the corruption of district attorneys. If there are any district attorneys who say I'm wrong, well, let's debate it in a public forum, assholes. You won't, because the Nazis didn't like to debate.